This is Falkirk Daft.
Welcome once again to a very special edition of Falkirk Daft. I know we did our season review and that was going to be the last one, but there's been some big news over the last couple of days that we had to talk about and had to jump back on here. As usual, I'm joined by my fellow Falkirk Daft host, Mr. Ross Wayne.
Good afternoon, gents.
And today we are joined by Falkirk Supporters Society committee member, Mr. Paul Robertson. Hello, Paul.
Hey, Paul.
Hi, guys.
Well, do you know what? You're one of our first guests on this podcast, Paul. So it's just a nice way. It's a nice way to bookend this season with having you back on here. Now, over the last 24 hours, so you've seen the news. I'm going to read out the statement, which you've maybe read about, seen on various places. But this is what's happening. Falkirk Supporters Society is pleased to announce it has obtained £350,000 interest-free 20-year loan from the Scottish Government Fan Bank, making Falkirk Supporters Society the largest shareholder in the club. These funds will allow us to improve the club's infrastructure, progressing to re-establish the Falkirk Academy and reinforcing the playing budget for next season. This loan would not have been possible without the current support of the Falkirk Supporters Society membership that we have. We would like to thank the Scottish Government for this loan, which will also have additional benefits to the Falkirk community, where the facilities are used extensively with our partners such as the Falkirk Foundation. Falkirk Supporters Society will continue to raise money for Falkirk Football Club by collecting monthly subscriptions. The loan will be repaid over 20 years, with over 80% of all new money raised by the FSS continuing to be given to the club as further share purchase or other investment. Falkirk Supporters Society has recently signed a formal agreement with Falkirk Football Club to be recognised as the official supporters organisation and to have 2 fan directors on the board. Paul, this is brilliant news, absolutely brilliant news. Talk us through it and how it came about.
Well, I think it's great news, and it's much needed investment into the club via purchase of shares. The last Scottish Government's manifesto, obviously a political party, had the idea of a fan bank included in it. This would be a initiative which would hold funds which supporters organisations could apply to get money to buy shares in the club and be a way of encouraging supporter ownership of clubs where possible, or at least a significant say. We happen to have been the first organisation that have applied for this, but it was done after a great deal of discussion behind the scenes, and we've kept it quiet.
I'm amazed how quiet this has been kept, by the way. It's been like, because we got whispered a couple of weeks ago, and I've not told anyone, and I'm amazed that it has not leaked out in one way or whatsoever, knowing our support, Paul.
I'm thankful for all the gossips out there keeping quiet. I mean, about 20 people maybe knew about this one way or another because they had to, because we've been discussing it in the committee, and so the club knew, and a few other people had picked up on it. But yeah, we've managed to keep it really quiet. But the Scottish Government was primarily impressed with us. We've been going since November 2 years ago, and we have now 670 members. It goes up and down, but it's more or less going, slow growth all the time. We're raising over £8,000 every month for the club, which we're investing in shares. And up to this point, we've got 383,000 shares in the club, which in itself, in a first year of raising money, is pretty good, I think. However, we had to go through a long process of due diligence. They weren't just going to give £350,000 to just anybody, and they wanted to check out our democratic structures, that we had things in place to stop any misuse of the funds. They wanted to see that we were transparent, and that's one thing I do believe FSS is. In fact, I also think the club is now much more transparent in general.
Yeah.
And we're committed to diversity, and we're committed to the community and community involvement. And all these things were perfect. That's exactly what they want organisations like ourselves to do. So we're really proud of being the first organisation to pass all of these tests. And we are about to sign, we haven't signed it yet, but it'll be done on Wednesday morning. We're recording this on Monday. A deal with the Scottish Government that will give us £350,000 interest-free loan over 20 years. And if you go and make a mortgage calculator That effectively is the government giving us £160,000 for nothing, given its interest-free loan. So that's really what's happened. And I think it's great. The club is essentially just about making a small profit when you add in the cup run and the much higher season ticket sales than we expected. But this is icing on the cake. We could talk in a minute about where the money might go and what it might be used for. But I think the club will be very, very grateful for £350,000 at the end of this season.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, let's just talk about where the money is going to be used. Will you have a say, or
Scott Arfield.
Will you guys, now being the largest shareholders in the club, will you have more of a say on where that money gets used, Paul?
Well, we've had discussions with the club on this, and whilst we have taken the position that we're not going to mandate the club what they have to do with it, it's pretty certain that some of the money will go towards infrastructure. Now, that means the club's got £150,000 grant towards replacing the pitch. My assumption is that the rest of the 150,000 needed will come from this money.
Yeah.
The floodlights need attention. So, and it's a false economy only doing various repairs on those just now. We probably need to improve the floodlights. So I think the club will be spending money on that. Now, this has the effect of not just being for the football club. The Falkirk Foundation has literally hundreds of kids and women and adults playing on the pitch regularly. So it's a major boost to that charity. And I think that the Scottish Government are impressed with that as well.
Yeah, was that a premise of, do you think that's why the loan came? Because you've turned around to them and sort of said, right, we're going to invest into the club, and as a result, we're investing into the community. So the government immediately go, right, well, that's the kind of thing we're looking for here.
Yeah, I think it's a major boost to the application.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it would be a problematic situation if we took £350,000.
Say we're going to spend it on Scott Arfield.
Scott Arfield.
Let's run a poll.
Anyway, I mean, if we read those statements that Scott put out, he's going to come and play for nothing for us. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, so why would we need spending money on it? No, I think there's that. The other thing that the money will go to is we don't know how it's going to be spent, but it will go towards youth development. Now, the club's clearly committed to reinvigorating the idea of an academy. We've just signed 4 modern apprenticeships from the guys who've been playing at the under, is it 16 level? I would imagine over the next year, we'll see that slowly ramped up. And anyone who's seen Tony Begg talk will recognise the incredible enthusiasm that man has. And I certainly have a lot of confidence in him. And it will be great the day that we see these guys play for our first team. 3 of them already have. But, a more regular place. And then, I mean, it always seems a little bit barbaric, but, we can sell them on in the future. And we can go back to the way we were before, that unavoidably we were a selling club. So we might be able to develop players and get money that way. And then the final thing is the money will, to some extent, be seen by the playing budget. I think that if this money hadn't come, the playing budget, was set and the budgetary elements are sitting there. But if we can take 150,000 of this money, put it towards the pitch, that frees up £150,000 of the club's own money. So I'm not here to argue for John McGlynn to have a much, much bigger budget. It's up to him to do that. I'm sure he's capable of it. But I think that you can see it takes some of the pressure off saving money elsewhere. So all in all, it's those 3 things that will benefit community engagement with improvements in the infrastructure, youth development, and down the road playing budget. And I think it's a good thing. I mean, I don't think anyone would argue against this, surely.
Oh, I think this is absolutely fantastic. I really do. And as you've said, benefits not just to the club, but to the community. But as well as that, it puts the fans, if we weren't already, at the front of the queue in terms of the ownership, the shareholding. So just to clarify then, once this comes into the club, which I assume will be June before the funds come in, but what will this do to the total shareholding for the Supporters Society and the percentage of ownership again?
Okay, well, we currently have 383,000 shares, all purchased because of people's generous donations, in the main 10 quid a month, but some people pay more. And this will buy 875,000. I'm just double checking that. 875,000 extra shares. So that takes to 1,200,000 and odd shares in the club. Now, our original original aim was to get 26% of the club, which is what all of the three legs of the three-legged stool one always hears about was aspiring to. This takes us to more or less 25%. So we're 1% away from the 26 we originally were. But once we have purchased these shares, there's very few shares left. All these shares were ring-fenced for the supporters to buy. 2 more sets of payments from us in 2 months will completely deplete all the shares available and we'll hit the 26%. So that gives us significant say in the club. I mean, we're the largest shareholder collectively, more than any other individual, more than the patrons group. Now, it would be great if the patrons group can up their percentage as well. But the reason we always said 26% was that it would be a way of stopping any external threat to us. We've got so much voting power between us and the patrons, we should be able to stop any special resolutions. So if someone comes along who wants to buy the club and we don't like that person, and that's happened in the past, I mean, I was at a meeting this week where I was told that once every month there was an approach to the club to buy the club or a significant share in the club. And most of those are just speculative. So it's not, a false worry. I mean, these people are out there. And I think we all know some people who have attempted to do this in the past and we didn't want. So it's doubling down on that protection that we've always said that we're there for. This is what FSS is there for. To not only be a trade union for the supporters, which I think it is, it's our way of being able to tell the board what we want, but we can protect the club. And we will probably discuss this in a minute, but we've just signed a head of agreements with the football club where they recognise us as the official supporters arm of the club. And it also gives us 2 fan directors on the board. Now, we've had 2 fan directors on the board, but actually only one of those was mandated by our shareholding. That was given to us by the club. Now, this head of agreement we've got absolutely solidifies it that we will have 2 fan directors on the board.
I was actually going to ask that, Paul, with the money going in, would there not be room for an extra board, a member from the FSS to go on as the largest shareholders now?
I don't think any of us is asking for that yet.
Right.
I mean, I think we've got to remember the balance here. There's the original shareholders, the management group. There is the patrons as well. We don't want to dwarf any of these groups. I understand that during an AGM, only 40% of all the shares vote. So if we come along with 26% of those shares, we're probably going to dwarf anyone else. So we've got responsibility on ourselves to act quite responsibly. And I think we will. I mean, I think we've played a blinder so far, if you forgive the lack of any modesty. And our fan directors are there and they're putting our case. They legally are not allowed to take instruction from us. They have to take all information they have and vote in the benefit of all shareholders. But there's no question that they listen to the meetings. The other thing that's happening is we've agreed with the board to meet them every couple of months. And if we've got any issues, we can bring that up with them. And then the other thing is we've got the supporters liaison officer, who's Kevin Beattie, who I think is doing a great job. And he's there. And if anyone wants to bring any issues up about how we run the club, or things such as supporters' rights or access for disabilities, then Kevin's there to take that to the board. And I know of one occasion where we've absolutely tried to improve things by having better training of the stewards, because I was literally there when someone asked, who was had mobility issues, how they get into the club when they've got to walk up 2 flights of stairs to the top. And the steward told them they just had to do it. Now, that's just education. I mean, the stewards just have to know that there's a lift there for people to go. So we're working on all of these fronts. There's a lot of dialogue between the board and ourselves. And we don't always agree. I mean, it's rushing outside, to Pye and Bovril and going, oh, a bunch of bastards won't do what we want, right? I mean, but any disagreements we've had, we've resolved pretty easily, right?
Yeah.
They're small so far. But we are independent. We're going to remain independent. And if they do something we don't like, then I don't think there's any question we would happily complain and do what we could to change it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's great news, but just, I'm sorry, I'm negative Nelly here, Paul, right? Just, I'm thinking, because, we're Falkirk supporters, got to think about disaster scenarios here, Paul. If the FSS somehow couldn't repay the loan in years to come, just say, because I guess now we're in the position that you've reached your goal. I mean, that's no reason for people to stop, investing in the club and in the FSS. But let's just say everyone turn out, oh, we've done it now. We're going to stop investing in the FSS. If we weren't able to pay back that loan, where would that leave the shares?
The shares would be... the only circumstance that could happen is if FSS disbanded and didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
In which case the shares would legally be kept with SSS. There would be perhaps a question of how legally that was resolved. I don't know. I'm no company lawyer. But the really important thing is that FSS keeps going. One, we've got to pay the money back, right? I mean, it is a loan. Even though they're giving us effectively £160,000 in interest payments, we have agreed to pay it back. But the first payment is in August of next year. And then we only have to pay them back round about 18,700 a year. Now, that means less than 20% of all the income that we make as FSS to buy shares will be going for repayment. 80% of all money that we are bringing in, and let's assume that we continue as we're going now, will mean about £80,000 a year will be given to the club. Now, we need to have a conversation with the club about what that money gets, whether or not we decide to direct it to one particular development, such as youth development or playing budget or whatever.
Yeah.
And we haven't made a final decision on this, but it looks likely we'll have a general meeting of FSS members close to the beginning of the season to ask what their opinions are and how they want us to do that. But the first 2 tranches, the next 2 months, will buy the rest of the shares. Right. Thereafter, the money will go to the club, and we have to make a decision about how that goes there. So please don't give up giving your money to FSS.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's as important as ever to keep giving. And every month, your money, most of your money, 80% of your money is going to the club still. And importantly, you're helping us do things like replace the pitch. I mean, that's essential. Look at what we're playing on. It's causing injuries. It's causing, a degree of wear. Yeah, well. I mean, I get that, right? But I mean, let's be realistic. We were never going to go for grass, right? It's, the ongoings are too expensive. We can't have things like events on the pitch, right? Yeah. If we buy a new pitch, we'll get 20 years out of it, which is the length of the loan, if you think about it, So this next pitch we buy will be effectively there for a while. And it is more or less the best you can get at this level, short of being a hybrid pitch, right? It's is it G4? I think they're called. Yeah. It should be a decent pitch, and I think we should see the difference of it, right? But good. Also, the other thing about having a plastic pitch, I know this is contentious, but it does mean the community, the Falkirk Foundation, can play all these games on it, and it's not getting destroyed. Imagine playing 5 or 6 games a week on a grass pitch. It would be by Christmas looking hellish. It'd be like those 1970s Leeds games where they're up to their knees in mud. Although actually, I'd love to see that. I love those games. I was around in the 1970s and I remember them quite well.
Right.
Paul, just a quick question for me. So you mentioned there around so less than 20% will go towards the repayment of the loan, which leaves 80% of any funds made by the rest of the membership. You said a decision will be made on what those funds are used, because obviously once the shares are bought, unless the club ever release more, then the money would then just be a donation to the club for a particular cause. Can I just clarify? You said so that the FSS members will have an opportunity to decide what the bulk of the regular money goes in could be used for. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's what. I mean, obviously, I don't want to preempt any general meeting that we have, but that will be the topic of conversation. We're planning next year to have a number of public meetings. I mean, you may remember we had John McGlynn speak, which was an amazing presentation that he actually got in trouble for, about how he approached the Hibs game and how he analysed the Hibs and everything else, and then let it slip that he also talked about how to pressurise the referee, which he got into trouble for. But I'm very keen on us to have a whole number of speakers from different organisations. From the women's team, we had Tony Begg speak last year at the AGM. I'd like us to have some of the sports scientists and the analysts come on and tell us stuff. People from outside of Falkirk as well. I mean, there is, in England, a fan-led review that Tracy Crouch has just brought in. Quite amazingly, a Tory did this, but it's actually quite progressive. I mean, it's an attempt to give supporters rights, one of which, for example, is a club can't just change heritage items. So they can't change the colour of your strip, they can't change the badge, can't change the name. And I personally believe we need something like that in Scotland. Neil Doncaster was on a podcast earlier this week saying it wasn't needed because Scotland's so much better than England, which is absolute bollocks, right? So I want to get Henry McLeish along, who used to be First Minister, to talk about this because he's involved behind the scenes with Paul Goodwin on trying to get a fan-led initiative like that. And, you know, we're members of other organisations such as Supporters Direct in Scotland. There we're trying to bring in an away fans charter, which gives rights to away fans. Now, I know we all don't like the opposition, right? And we want Dunfermline to be sitting in the shittiest bit of the ground or whatever. But actually, it works two ways. I mean, when we're away, we can get there. So, you know, we're very active looking after and putting a voice of the supporters. That's true of being in Falkirk, but it's also true in the wider football issues that we face every Saturday we go to a match.
Yeah. Hi, Negative Nelly, back here in the corner again, Paul. Hi. Because I'm going to ask this question. If we did need outside investment, you know, it comes to the point that, you know, we're maybe someone comes along, they've got a big wad of money, just Ross wins the lottery, for example, and decides he wants to come and invest in Falkirk Football Club. What would happen? Would the shares be diluted then, or would Ross have to buy from the Falkirk Supporters Society? What would happen in that scenario?
And in that scenario, I think we would have to discuss with the club a share issue. If we thought this was in the best interest of Falkirk, that would then go to a special AGM, I think, is the actual way it would be. And then those shares be available. That, of course, waters down everyone's shares. I mean, everyone loses a little bit of power. So there might be a case, for example, before we start donating the 80% to the club, that we have a share issue and we buy more shares as we go along. But we don't want to totally dominate all the other parts of the club and the other shareholders. So that's a delicate balancing act, something we have to discuss amongst ourselves and so on. But yes, that's the way it would be done.
Right.
But even if Mr. Negative Nelly, someone comes along with millions, it doesn't always work well. You know, I mean, look at Partick Thistle. I mean, they had a benefactor who won the lottery, literally won the lottery. And it wasn't long ago that it looked like his promise to give all of his shares to the sport wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Now, they managed to campaign and get it. But, you know, you've got to be very, very careful when outside money comes in.
Right. So if Ross, that's just a warning. If you do win the lottery, Ross, you know.
I trust Ross, though. You know.
Oh, you trust Ross? Ross is in. Ross is in. That's good to know.
Look at that face, right? I mean,
I'd rather not. Listen, Paul. It's great news. You know, it's something you guys have worked really hard for over. You know, and like you say, it's the Falkirk Supporters Society hasn't been on the go for that long. So to get this loan and, you know, be able to get to where you want to be is great news. And you know, that money you know, now we've hit the goal, the money going back into the club at 8%. And it is just, everyone's just got to keep going with the Falkirk Supporters Society, and just, you know, hopefully members will be encouraged by this news. We'll get more members in, and, you know, hopefully, you know, more money into the club. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, and the one thing we'd say is we're always welcome to ideas and people getting involved. You know, the one thing we are really looking for is other people to come on the committee and be co-opted on. Yeah. Especially if you have specialist, you know, knowledge. We've got a lawyer on the committee.
Don't look this way. Don't look this way. We've got no knowledge at all. Unless you want to know anything about radio or mortgages, you know.
Well, you know, radio expertise. I mean, you're very good, John, right? I mean, I hear you occasionally on Radio Clyde. So, you know, I mean, I only listen to Radio Clyde when the Bahamas come on the Sport Talk programme. laugh at the really crazy old firm guys that they get on there, but it's quite entertaining. But no, we need help. We need people to get involved. We're always willing to talk. You can just email us and we'll discuss it. And at the moment, for example, we've got a poll running online of our members only about the Conference League proposals that the SFA.
Yes.
Now, these are stupid. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I'm in favour of them. They are effectively going to relegate 200 clubs straight off.
Yeah.
We're asking our supporters, what do they think of it? And then we're going to tell the club. In fact, the club asked us for guidance on this. The club will then vote in the SFA. So you get a say if you remember the FSS. And people really must keep going, keep supporting us. And I think as we grow, we'll develop new ideas of how to help the club along. So thank you all, right? Thank you all for your money so far, and just keep giving it to us.
And just remember, Paul, from Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility.
Absolutely true.
So there you go. Now you're the largest here shareholders. Just remember those words echoing through your head, all right? Brilliant. Listen, Paul, thank you so much for joining us on a very special Falkirk Daft. We really appreciate your time. And as we said, brilliant news for the club. And keep supporting the FSS.
Yes, and thank you very much for having us on. Really appreciate it, guys. It's a great podcast, honestly. And, you know, you do it so well.
That's all one, John.
That's brilliant, Paul. We'll see you next season.
See you, man. Don't know what I'm doing in the next 5 weeks, but, you know, hey.
This is Falkirk Daft.